Flood story retold. I was living in Lismore CBD on Orion Street, just opposite the Catholic Church in New South Wales. I was at home the evening of the flood on the 27th of February 2022, finishing unpacking my belongings that had come up from Newcastle a few weeks earlier. It had started to pour down with rain that afternoon after a glorious sunset, and it kept raining. I wasn't feeling too concerned, just very comfortable and sleepy. I ended up staying up late unpacking, which is unusual for me, as I like to go to bed somewhat early. I received a text warning about a flood, which didn't leave me feeling too concerned because I was 12 meters above the ground and the house I was in never flooded. And then my friend rang me and told me it was going to flood over the dam wall at 5 a.m. and asked me what I would like to do, remain in the house, or he could pick me up and take me to his place just in case the water levels was higher than predicted. At first I declined the offer and was planning to remain in the house, but as the night grew on, I put everything up off of the floor onto higher surfaces and went to bed thinking it would only be a minor flood. Then the rain grew heavy and I received a life-threatening situation text from SES telling me to evacuate and go to a friend's house. So I rang my friend and said I didn't want to end up electrocuted in the house, so I didn't know how to switch off the power in the house, and I didn't feel comfortable after receiving the text to remain there. So we agreed to meet at 4 a.m. I went to try and sleep, and when I found that I couldn't, I felt the rain was too heavy, and then I received another warning text from emergency SES, and then I saw flashing lights and a truck taking people out of their houses down the street from the back of my house, and I started to panic and rang my friend to say I wanted to go straight away. He came probably 30 minutes later and we left at 2 a.m. The water went over the dam wall at 2:30 a.m. So we got out just in time after I frantically ran around the house packing what I could and thought I would need for 1 week's stay in one-to-one suitcase. I left a lot of things behind I wish I could have taken with me, and I was in a mad rush, but we got out just in time in the pouring rain, driving through the flash flooding waters near my house and near the petrol station just diagonal to me. I found I couldn't sleep that night at all. I was worried about my belongings and my neighbours, wishing I had woken them up and warned them before I left. The news was out fairly quickly all over Facebook about what had happened, but unfortunately other social media channels took some time to catch up and the public news even longer. I received calls from the real estate agents fairly soon after, a day or two later, to check up on me to see if I had survived the floods, and then advised me not to pay any further rent on the property and that they would be returning my bond to me ASAP. The house had been sold that Friday and papers were due to be signed on the Monday. The buyer fortunately changed their mind just in time and avoided the inevitable costs that would follow with the repairing of the damage that was done to the house. It proved very stressful that week, not knowing how far the water level rose in my house and what the damage was and what remained. I honestly wasn't prepared for the shock of it all when I returned back to my place by boat end of the week. We spent the week worrying about food shortages and a friend who was out in Nimbin at the time of the floods. The minute I could go back, I took the first opportunity to retrieve what I could from my house before the others got to pilfer. It was definitely a boat ride I will never forget, dodging power lines and seeing all the familiar streets flooded. All we could see was rooftops and treetops. We couldn't tell which street was which, and there was the unfamiliar sight of bedding, bins, couch cushions, and bits of broken furniture floating around. We were carefully avoiding not to hit with our small boat. Although we were advised not to go out, it was not the time to discriminate against unvaxxed SES workers and locals seeking to find their neighbours and friends and family. There were many people still trapped in houses and no one there to help, so we went out to find those who were not contactable and were in perceived danger. I went to check up on my neighbours, and by the time we pulled up to my place, the water was 12 metres high and I could enter the Queenslander house. I went inside as the others checked up on my neighbours' welfare. As I entered, I went into a state of shock. I was not prepared for the amount of damage left by the violent flood waters. Aside from the broken front window and glass everywhere, the front door that was no longer closed and the back door, my belongings were what you could term trashed, quite literally. A broken mess lay before me, all covered in a fine layer of mud from what looked like a swamp or creek. I wandered through the house, seeing if there was anything I could salvage, and was heartbroken, seeing all my belongings broken and damaged beyond repair. I wandered into a bathroom where the hot water system had fallen over and was spouting water everywhere. It felt unsafe there, so I knew to leave the place quickly and report it straight away as a burst pipe. I grabbed a couple more things on the way out, but to my surprise, the only thing that was not covered in mud was my possessed porcelain doll, which just sat there in a plastic tub with books in it, without a scratch on her. I was amazed at how the heavy tub had somehow floated into one of the far-reaching bedrooms from the living room without a scratch on it. The water levels had clearly gone up over the window level, as it was evident on all the walls across the house. It looked like it may have just missed the air conditioner mounted on the wall there in the living room, but the doors came off, the cupboards were broken, my dresser was broken, the new couch and the table all gone, damaged beyond repair. The electricity was switched off in the street, I found out later that afternoon, and they had turned off the water there too, as next door was spouting water from the roof of the hotel in several places. My neighbours were out of the house. They left via a window. It seemed there was no one there, and the hotel was still completely under, and just the tip of the roof was showing, so we had no idea who survived there. Another week had passed, and we located our friend who was waiting for the flood waters to recede, and eventually heard back from both neighbours who had escaped narrowly. Red Cross was hopeless at locating missing people, and we had to do it ourselves. Finally, word got out of the news that my phone started to ring with people out of state checking up on me 2 weeks later after the event. It was kind of a downer because the news got out so late and it didn't even cover the full extent of the damage done or the circumstances we found ourselves living in. Food shortages were definitely a thing because there was only one small Coles shop on top of a hill, and everyone was panic buying from that, and it got emptied twice. Thankfully, the house I stayed at had enough dry food in it to last for up to a month, but it was still stressful nonetheless, living from day to day, rationing food and clean water out to last until the flood waters were completely dry. The sound of the constant helicopters overhead was deafening and something I will never forget. This went on for weeks. My tummy got upset, I developed constant burping, and I had to seek out a naturopath to fix the digestive issue. And that developed an account of all the mud I was walking in, and I was constantly on my hands and feet and in the oceans that had seeped into my skin. I went back into the house to collect my belongings the end of the second week after the floodwaters had truly receded. My landlord was there to let in a volunteer team from Byron Bay that had so kindly offered to help me get my belongings out of the house. I was wanting to take my time removing the items, but I wasn't given any. As soon as the door opened, my belongings were all thrown out onto the front lawn within a matter of a couple of hours. I was supposed to be asked what I wanted to keep, but there were 9 people who let themselves into my house, and I completely lost track of what was going on. I was devastated and grieving and feeling disorientated and sick from the smell of the mud that now smelled like swine and rotting food left in the kitchen. The lizards and insects had now all moved in and made themselves at home amongst my belongings. It was disgusting. I was asked by 2 volunteers on occasion what I wanted to keep and what I didn't, and the rest just threw everything out, including my brand new dishes and kitchenware, which I had to fish out of the pile of rubbish later. Additionally, this team, in their efforts to move my belongings out ASAP, broke quite a few items. I was probably more devastated being thrown out of my house with all my belongings in a matter of hours like that than anything else. It truly made my blood boil to be mistreated in that way, and then to later find graffiti in my kitchen, most likely put there by someone from the team. It wasn't easy by the simplest terms. It was a nightmare, in actual fact, and all the landlord cared about was fixing the house. This is how tenants commonly get treated, like an afterthought or a commodity, not a human being. I was very fortunate to have 3 friends there helping me out on the day to get my muddy, potentially salvageable remainder of my belongings into plastic bags, then cars and a trailer load back to my friend's place to dump on their front lawn for cleaning. Yes, a lot of things went missing, even in that move, that I had been given time to sort through. I would have salvaged. Think of a house full of your belongings. Now remove all the furniture and electrical equipment and any musical instruments, mattresses, blankets, and pillows. Now divide what you have left in half, and that's what I saved in my move. Half my clothes rotted, dolls were broken, toys were thrown out, jewelry went missing, and the list goes on. What I saved? Some clothes, jewelry, moldy books, hair clips, some photos, dad's paintings, some CDs and cassettes, 1 pillow and blanket. Honestly, all bed linen, blankets, and pillows could have been saved and washed. This was just poor advice given to me to throw it all out. It makes their job easier and mine harder. To recover what I lost, a whole household. 4 months later, head stuck deep in mud cleaning all day, every day, I completed the task. I had some help from a couple of friends to clean up. Other than that, majority of the work I did all on my own. I was exhausted, sick, and tired of cleaning and being covered in soggy clothes full of mold and mud each and every day. Every day I ran into the next day and I could not see the end or the light of the tunnel. I felt like a never ending nightmare to live in. When I finished, I wasn't sleeping or eating well. I was stressed and sick with the flu. I finished by making sure I did at least 2 hours a day of mud cleaning and then my music once a week and my walks. Once I moved out of my friend's place into a hotel, I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. In the first hotel, there was a suicide next door to me. Then someone completely trashed the room. People were taking drugs in the rooms and up all hours. I also heard from some other flood victims about the drinking and domestic violence that went on in other hotels. I was abruptly moved shortly after into another hotel for complaining too much after my mum passed away. I don't complain now, and I'm much happier living in a better hotel. Fixing my health and house hunting is what I spend my time doing amongst my musical pursuits. I am grateful to all those who came forward to help out just after the floods with free clothing, free donations, food, furniture, mattresses, and to my friends that let me stay in their house for such a long time and to clean the mud off all my belongings. It was a very generous and kind. I was touched to see the community come together like that and help each and every one of us out. It made my woes seem minor in comparison. I understand the help we were offered and given was nowhere near enough to cover the losses of those involved, but I am grateful that we did receive something instead of nothing, as in some countries. I also understand some got out with less damage than others, and some are still left behind, still cleaning up the mess since February, living with fear of a potential second flood overhead. There is no substitute for the pain suffered or the lives lost in these floods or the stories that got left untold. I am one of the fortunate ones to have had some help along the way and to have managed to save some of my belongings. There are others who have lost everything they have owned, including family members and pets, and there are others not long ago just coming out of hospitals too, having to face the same devastation months later. These are the memories I will hold with me for the rest of my life, and yes, I still overreact to flood warnings. I relived one just recently in safety. Though the memories subside and fade into the distance, I see my body still remembers the shock and the fears of the worst every time there is another flood warning. I truly feel for all the people in Australia who have flooded. There doesn't seem to be anywhere to go to escape these natural disasters except build cities on water.